everyone. Welcome back to Season 7 of the Content Matters podcast, sponsored by Discover CX by Ingenix. We are kicking off the season by talking about what else? AI. But it's not what you think. I'd like to welcome Noz Urbina to the podcast. Noz is the founder of Urbina Consulting. It's a practice focused on journey-centered omni-channel content strategy. But that's not what we're talking about today either. We will talk about that in a few months. Noz will come back and kind of have that conversation. What we want to talk about on this episode is something else. We want to talk about how AI is reshaping our world, including how we communicate, how we make decisions, how we understand ourselves. For as much as I think we all get excited about what AI can do for us, we also need to think about and be aware of the downsides or the concerns around AI. And that's what Noz is here to talk about. So welcome, Noz. I'm really excited to get started.
Thank you very much. I am too.
Cool. So we're going to just kind of dive right in because I think this is kind of a huge topic that could go in a million different ways. But I want to start with this phrase that you've defined called truth collapse. What does that mean and why is it a significant threat to us?
So like my kind of go-to definition for truth collapse right now is it's referring to the erosion of our shared and personal truth caused by mediating our learning, our communication, our decision-making through systems which are algorithmic. And the goals of those algorithms are not always aligned with human well-being.
Yeah.
They're aligned with the goals of the providers of those algorithms. So it's a cumulative effect that all these things have on how we perceive ourselves, how we relate to each other, and then at a social level, how we have collective enterprises like democracy or social discourse or politics. All of these things are all being impacted and influenced through the fact that so much of our work and life and socializing and communicating is done in a mediated environment.
Yeah, I think we don't always think about that when we're kind of looking and talking about AI, for sure.
Yeah,
So,
what I felt is that AI as a term has sort of arrived on the scene in the last few years. And I started the Truth Collapse website and podcast and discussing the topic because I've been kind of worried about AI when it didn't have a face or a voice. So when I'm talking about Truth Collapse and the danger, you asked me, like, why is it such a significant threat? I think that we felt that the internet was this grand buffet where we get to choose. We get to go out there and choose all the things we want to ingest and consume and learn things. And we saw all the positives, and we saw it as this increase of choice. And since the first search algorithms and social media algorithms, those choices have been being filtered for us in advance. So we get to choose what from the top 6 links that Google says are the answer to our question. We get to choose from the videos that TikTok says are going to be interesting to us, and so on and so on. Amazon, Instagram, and then the one I bring up a lot, for example, is when it also extends into culture, like Spotify, or things like Bumble or Tinder, or when we're meeting our partners and socializing through these things.
So that's what you mean when you say that AI is a participant in our culture? That's what you're kind of referring to?
Yeah. So I'll go a bit heady and say, well, what is culture? And so culture is kind of the umbrella term for all of the interpersonal things that we built up. It's our institutions, it's our preferences, it's our habits and rituals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that all these systems have built up across tens of thousands of years of human history. And what's happening now is because when you and I have a conversation, we are so often having it in a medium that is influencing that conversation. So, so already when the examples I gave, where our choices are being made for us, but we have the illusion of choice. We feel that we are autonomous. Um, then it is already becoming a participant culture. I live in Europe. I'm a Canadian. I work in the U.S. My wife is French, so like my roots are Peruvian. I've always had a interesting view on culture, and I see this kind of Americanization of the world, because that was happening anyway since like the 20s.
Mm,
But what's been happening it's been supercharged in the last 20 years, because algorithms choose, they choose what parts of our bodies we can show. They choose what is art. They choose what goes viral. And so there's this constant biasing towards English, towards things that are acceptable to the founders of these companies. So there's that. And now AI can actually produce culture. It can produce art. It can produce music. It can produce texts and analyses and content. So it's very much becoming an active agent in our culture.
but I mean, so AI learns off of us. It learns off of all of these content that we've already created today. So it's not really, I mean, it sort of creates new stuff, but it doesn't, because it's creating. So how do you, I guess the question maybe is more, I guess it's learning off more stuff that's more Americanized than it is other cultures, and that's why it leans us towards that kind of way of thinking and producing content.
Yeah. So there's one. Yes. So it is what I try to refer to is the kind of the unnatural environment. So we are, as human beings and brains, involved in an environment, and each of us grows up in an environment, and our personalities develop in an environment. AI changes our environment, be it curating algorithms, recommendation algorithms, or generative algorithms. It's changing the inputs that we have, and it's making more of an artificial environment. And so yes, it learns from us, but it makes choices that we would not choose. So we have all sorts of self-regulating mechanisms inside us. When we get too hot, we go somewhere where it's colder. When we get hungry, we eat. We naturally try to find equilibrium. Let's take a simple one, which we all use every day. So a social platform's algorithms, they are optimizing for certain brain chemicals. They are optimizing for rage, excitement, disgust, arousal, etc.
Yeah.
So that is an unnatural state. So even if it learns from us, even if it takes our content that humans made and shows it to us, it's doing an unnatural selection, which then changes the way that our world would be. But because we think we're the ones in control, we're not seeing that change in culture.
Yeah. So social media definitely plays a strong role in how this kind of impacts us. And does the way that social media kind of polices or enforces what's kind of right or wrong on their networks, that's all driven by AI too, right?
Yeah, all of these algorithms. I think it bothers me a lot that generative AI like ChatGPT and Midjourney and all these new crop of AIs have kind of stolen the term. But I remember putting in slides. Geez, it's nearly a decade ago now, in 2016, when the head of search at Google, what became the head of AI, was replaced by the head of AI. So it became one role. They used to have their AI team and they had their algorithm team. And so there was a time when humans were writing the rules of the algorithm. They could understand the rules of the algorithm, and human beings made human decisions to fine tune them.
Right.
Now that there's a whole question about the relationship of whether a corporation should be deciding, our information diet. But then even that was replaced by a machine, where the humans are no longer making the choices. You don't write the code of ChatGPT or Midjourney or even Google anymore. The machine learns what works best to achieve the goals that have been set for it. So I think that we're social media is the easiest one to see,
Yeah.
but it infiltrates everything that we put these algorithms into.
Yeah.
So I think that generative is just as much um, a potential threat, and it's more of a potential threat because it looks like us, it sounds like us, it can participate in a conversation, it can pretend to be us.
Yeah.
But we've been with it all along. So this has been happening to us for 20 years.
Yeah. But I mean, and yes, it's been around forever, but corporations really, ever since generative AI became the topic a couple of years ago, it's like there's been a deep dive into incorporating it into all of our applications and all of our systems and taking over not people's jobs, in some cases yes, people's jobs, but taking over a lot of the thinking for people. But that's, I mean, how do you combat that? Because that's happening everywhere, and any corporation that chooses not to do it almost seems like they get left behind.
Absolutely. It's an arms race.
Yeah,
It's an arms race where the arms are, the weapons are improving at a computer speed. So like nuclear bombs are not 100,000 more times more bomby than they were however many years ago.
yeah,
Um, Whereas these type of things grow at that speed and change at that speed. So it is definitely an arm race, and I am not, and I don't want to be anti-platform or anti-AI or anti-corporate. I work with these corporations. I work with AI every single day of my life. Um, it's the question of how do we combat this? It's about understanding what's really going on. So what I'm trying to do with Truth Collapse is define and illustrate the problem space so that people can make informed, consensual decisions.
right,
I think it's about being able to stop, realize that we're in this environment, think about what we want to do as individuals, and then use that awareness to make autonomous decisions, to talk to each other, and then see what we want to do as societies. As a corporation at the moment, you can't just not do it. You have to do it.
yeah,
So the question is, how do we make the most responsible choices we can, and then as societies change the environment that the corporations are in, which is regulation and cultural expectations, so that they don't rush in the wrong direction.
right. And but that's a challenge because just recently, I mean, the UK and the US refused to sign an agreement at that AI summit that said that we will do responsible, ethical AI because they said it stifles innovation. So if we can't get the government looking at it now, how do you, and if things are just going to get away from us, and how do you kind of come back and get it back under control? And then I would say, sorry, even the ones that are signing the agreement, like, how do you believe what they say, right?
Yeah. So I also don't want to give the impression that I have all the answers, but I do. What's happening, I think, I make a lot of effort to be apolitical when I'm talking on the Truth Collapse stage, because I think that what the main symptoms of uh, Truth Collapse is our reality is being replaced by binary. I'm not a 70-year-old French philosopher, so I'm not going to get too mystical about this, but I find it interesting that binary computers keep sorting us into these binary positions. Like the US was there's studies written about this decades ago. The US likes a binary, like Democrat, Republican, North, South, East, West. Um, what's it? Oh yeah, Coke, Pepsi, Apple, Samsung. Like the market tends to self-select down to two choices. But I think that algorithms supercharge that. Like the idea is they're going to sort us into groups, and then that makes it easier to give us, engage us, connect with us. I'll even say addict us. Um, and what's happening with the governments is that uh, they're making choices which are immediately and transactionally better for them, and that perpetuates the arms race.
Yeah,
When it's a perfect metaphor, the arms race, because like how do you get out of it? The first one to put down their gun is putting themselves in danger, a lot of danger. So it's only by talking, it's only through conversation and connections that we can calm the situation down and have discussions. At the moment, I don't see this getting better before it gets worse. That's the unfortunate truth. I think we're in for a decade or two of major teething pains. I'm trying to flatten the curve, if I use a COVID metaphor now. It's growing at an exponential rate. It's going to have an exponentially worse impact on us. So the more of us are kind of educating ourselves on like pre-vaccinating our minds, the more of us will be able to kind of make a change sooner.
Right. Do you think that the changes will start with people, or do you think maybe it sounds like governments won't, but maybe corporations will start to kind of make changes or make people think more about what they're doing as they implement these tools?
Corporations, as I said, you can't live with them, can't live without them. And the problem with a public corporation has a fiscal responsibility to do what is advantageous for its shareholders.
Right.
So, like, if I give you my money and I invest in your corporation, you can't then choose the least profitable path. Like, there's a certain amount of wiggle room in that, but you cannot. I think it has to start from the society pushing our institutions to control our corporations. Every time we've had unchecked corporations will just extract value until society tells the government to tell them to stop. That's
Right.
kind of the only way out of these. I think what we're seeing, and if you come back to the agreements you just said the U.S. and they didn't sign those agreements, who was at the inauguration? I think it's the first time in history there's been that level of like corporate presence at an inauguration on the
Mhm.
main stage. And it wasn't oil and gas, it wasn't aerospace, it was all tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no,
They're
it's
all
not.
there.
Corporations are not going to save us. We have to first change the environment that they are in.
Yeah. If anything, they're kind of going the opposite way they were headed with with the new US government in place. So that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to criticize the particular administration, but if we zoom out and look at the facts of what's happening, that is what is occurring. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that or judge anybody's decisions, but I would say that I think some more variety in the conversation uh, versus this go 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 mentality would be good. Which is, I've been training people on how to use AI. I've been implementing automated and algorithmic systems for my whole career, and so Truth Collapse was kind of me going, okay, wait, all right, but we do have to balance this conversation. We can't just talk about it as if it's all good all the time.
Right. So how do we as a person, how do I become more literate, AI literate, thinking about, and how do I think about things as I go about the work that I do? And then for people who are not in technology business or the type of business we're in, how do you communicate with them and have them kind of be aware of their surroundings and what's going on around them?
All this,
Yeah.
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 So I kind of break it down to three levels. I don't know if I said this explicitly already, but what I'm doing with Truth Collapse is looking at it at the societal level, like what institutions and governments and social discourse, democracy, that kind of thing. Then the interpersonal level, how it affects our relationships, our conversations, our relationship with our people around us, and then the internal level. Like I am a big cognitive science buff. I've even kind of presented on like how structuring content is good for the brain, and I've been big into cognitive science for a long time, and I think that you need to understand things like bias. We say bias, we throw the word around a lot, but what are our biases? We have confirmation bias, availability bias. We have examples like this is a frequently cited study that they did. I don't know if it was Harvard, it was one of the big universities, and they were publishing uh, different variations of gibberish on their, or not gibberish, or what was unintelligible to those people. So it's an English university, and they would be publishing just nonsense words. You could read them like they made like a sound, but they would be like scoodly flip. And they would print one. They would print them every day in the school's newspaper, and then they would print strings of Chinese characters, which most of the students couldn't read. And then at the end of a long period, they tested the students about whether that thing was positive or negative, like that simple. And so familiarity bias, it makes us acclimatize and become comfortable with whatever is more frequent, and even see it as positive. Like if it's been around for that long and it hasn't hurt me, it's probably a good thing. And you can see this in things like, oh well, they cut down that tree or whatever, they moved that building, or we get sentimental about changes. We feel positive about things simply because they have been there. And so in the study, they showed that the words that were printed with more frequency on the daily paper would be rated significantly more positively, and the ones that were put rarely are more negative. Like that's a really there's a beautiful book called Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. And that's a beautiful example of our predictable irrationality. That's our internal human algorithms showing their flaws. If you spin that same thing of like, oh, if this is strange, it's bad, you spin that out into racism and xenophobia and all sorts of different horrible things that we do.
Yeah.
So I think understanding how you work objectively is a good thing. I'm very scared and concerned about the enthusiastic self praise, which is happening for me on all ends of the spectrum of people right now. Phrases like living your truth, or the kind of the individual, whatever I do is just fine, and everyone else has to just deal with it. That kind of self flattery, it makes us feel good in the short term, and it may heal wounds, very real wounds that need real attention, or it may, let's say, band-aid over them. But in the long term, when you're not able to be objective about yourself and say, okay, well, this is how I'm flawed, these are my weaknesses, these are my difficulties, and this is how I can be fooled or led astray, then you don't have the defenses to enter this. So I think learning about yourself, being very frank and humble about who you are, how you can be tricked, how you formed habits that you may not like, that's a huge first step. And then really basic stuff like I posted on LinkedIn recently, just stop, rest so that you can deal with the rest. If we continue to do this, if we keep binging on stimulation, then we're constantly mentally exhausted and distracted, and that doesn't let us do anything constructive. We don't sleep as much as we used to. We have no downtime. We have no time for the brain to just kind of digest and put things in their proper place. Part of why I also started Truth Collapse is my own phone addiction. I'm an incredibly curious person, and I have basically a stream of YouTube. I've beat my algorithm to a shape where it's recommending me stuff that I love. I'm learning, I'm listening to great speakers, philosophers, scientists, but it's all the time. And so I now put my phone at the other end of the house 45 minutes before I go to bed. And I hadn't read a book. I had not finished a book in, I think, 5 years. I'm halfway through a book this month. We just if we keep giving into to our impulses and going, this is what I like, I'm enjoying this. If we keep just kind of chasing the positive all the time and not stopping and letting ourselves rest and digest, we can't deal with these things.
And this is something that as adults we can recognize and learn to do, but we also need to teach it in our children.
Thank you for bringing. Yes.
Because if our children, I mean, they are going to be the future of the ones who do force the AI regulations and the changes that are going to happen.
Absolutely. It, we've got ourselves in quite a pickle right now. We're having less kids. So I think we're probably kind of both in the sandwich generation, where you're taking care of your kids and you're trying to deal with everything they're going through and fund everything they're going through, and then your parents are also getting older and then they need support. But because there's less and less kids, there's less and less workers, there's less social security net, there's less taxes to go around. So we're squeezing ourselves so much. And then like I totally understand a parent who just gives their kid an iPad and goes, just give me some rest,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
What I hope though is that if you do that, you take the time to rest, not the time to play on your iPad. So we have to, yeah, we have to model those behaviors for younger people. Like, no, we're both going to be off our iPads right now, and we're gonna play with clay, or we're gonna go to the park. I
Yeah.
think that I'm endorsing these days less contacts, more contact. So like I have so many thousands of contacts on my phone, but I'm really being conscious about who am I going to make contact with, and the relationships that we want to develop, and those have to be with kids, and showing them the importance of that. Having 1,000 Facebook friends is not worth having one good real friend.
Yeah. And how do you teach them? How do you talk to them? Because I don't think this is something you can teach your kids. You need to have the open, honest conversations about what they're looking at on their social feeds is not always real and is stuff you have to be aware of how they're showing you more and more stuff based on what you look at now and different things like that. You have to have those conversations with your kids, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Finland, Finland, the Finnish should rule the world as far as I'm concerned. They years ago, the Finnish were already teaching digital literacy to children. And like I see it as in any other natural impulse we have that can be misdirected. So you teach your children about eating sugary foods. You can't have a diet of cake all the time, even if
Right.
you think you like it. We teach them about their sexuality. You can't do whatever you want in that domain. Um, we have to teach them the same about content. You can't sit on your iPad all the time. It is bad for you. Even if it feels good, it's bad for you.
Right.
So that discussion, we have it with other things, but I think we coming back to, we don't perceive the problem space. We don't have that conversations because we don't really have the discussion. Like the argumentation isn't there for us, and so that's why I started this, because I think we need to have, in as much as we know that why and how eating cake is bad for us all the time, we have to have the same thing about our information diets.
Yeah. Is there a way that corporations, social media, the media period can help us do that, or do you think that we're just kind of on our own trying to do it on it by ourselves?
Well, I think I'm not the only one talking about this. I honestly was a little bit frustrated, but just exactly when I decided to go public with all these ideas, I noticed that other people are too. So there's books coming out all the time. There's a lot more. So I was saying, I've got like a feed of YouTube hooked into my brain all the time. I'm seeing that if you look for it, there is a lot of stuff breaking this down right now. I am trying to human curate some of these resources so people can self-educate on truthcollapse.com. But I think that I'm seeing it on the mass media these days. Like I'll see it on CNN. I will see it on I don't know. It's an example of a channel I watch, Amanapur and Company.
Mhm.
They're just traditional journalism. It is mass media. The books are coming out. The latest one I wrote is called I wrote I started reading is called The Constitution of Knowledge, and it's in defense of truth, and it is a analysis of the it's using the American Constitution as a metaphor, and talking about how that's a written down constitution. Like we believe these things, and this is the way that we're going to structure governance. But that there's also an unwritten constitution of how what he calls reality-based communities manage themselves. If you're going to be a journalist, a scientist, a doctor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, a legislator, then you're kind of part of a system which self-corrects. So against the kind of messages we're hearing these days. So you can have in your personal life whatever beliefs you want. Whatever you want to believe on your own, whatever you want to tell your kids in your own home is up to you. But if you're going to be a lawyer, you're beholden to participate in the law, and that you can have your own personal opinions and you can put forward a hypothesis, but the institution will correct you if you go too far out of what is considered to be good law or sensible law. And so the rules in the constitution of knowledge, like there's a certain trust for the institution. You have to respect the institutions that are in place to self-correct. But the institutions are just nodes of the network of society. We're all feeding into what gets voted in as law. So we as individuals also can control the institutions. And nobody is right. Nobody gets to say, I have the truth, I have the way. That's a personal belief. But in the public sphere, we all actually look to validate. If you say something, I'm going to check that. And if I check it and I can't come out with the same results, then you have not actually done a reality-based solution. You've come up with a personal belief. Yeah. So I think that in the mass media, we're starting to come back to that. We got, at the beginning, all the news stations got extremely opinion-based. Everyone was just kind of saying what it was. We were feeding the machine. The social media was sucking up all the air. And so all the mass media started getting, leaving behind their standards. I think that they're seeing now truth collapse, for lack of a better word. And now even the mass media is going, wait a second, we had journalistic standards for a reason. We didn't publish all the most exciting stories all the time for a reason. And I think there's a resurgence now where those traditional institutions are starting to self-correct, but we have to continue to put pressure on them.
Yeah, like everything's not breaking news kind of thing.
Yeah. And 4 people on a split screen screaming at each other is not journalism.
No.
The way that the news was being presented was becoming more and more personal and engaging, like social media. In order to try to win those people back, it became more emotional. And I think that we're starting to see that it's starting to self-correct.
Yeah.
Not everywhere, obviously.
I think it would be interesting to see the school systems making those changes too, and doing, like you said, Finland does, teaching the kids, instead of saying, don't bring AI into the classroom, actually teach them about it and understand it better.
Yeah. So we have health class, we had sex ed. It may be uncomfortable for some people to talk about, it may be controversial, but we've decided as societies, it's better if the kids are educated and don't walk into things that are potentially dangerous and harmful, ignorant.
Yeah. Okay. This has been really interesting. Did I miss any questions for you that you think are important that people understand about this?
Yes and no. I could talk about this, and some people ask me, is there a book in this for you? And I'm like, maybe, because I have so much to say about this.
Yeah.
I think that those are the big ones. I would like to know what people want to know. So I kind of started this conversation, and I would like it to be a dialogue. So I want to know, do people want analysis on current events? Do they want reaction videos? Do they want commentary and analysis on what's going on? Do they want personal tips and tricks, like the thing you asked me about leaving the phone? I mentioned leaving the phone in the other room. Do they want their things that they can do in their own lives? Do they want to know how to contact their local legislator? More interest, like social level stuff. I'm very curious what people want to know, and so I'd like people to reach out. I'd like this to be uh, maybe even a community project. I have a lot of ideas, but I'm just one voice. So that's the thing in terms of my goals. What I'd like to try to try to understand from anybody who's listening.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's what people need is it's one thing to understand it, but it's another thing to know, well, how do I deal with it? What are the steps I
Yeah.
need to take? What should I think about? How should I talk about it with my kids or even my parents who, go online and do things
Oh,
that are
geez. Yeah. So I'll give another anecdote. Things like the straws that broke the camel's back to make me launch a whole website and start a whole side thing, which is not making, completely not financially responsible of me to do. Um, uh, my mother, I met my mom, and I live in Toronto, and my mother was sending me. Sorry, I'm from Toronto. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I now live in Europe, and my mother was sending me all this stuff about Toronto and how it was becoming more violent and people were and all these negative stories that were coming through. And then she came to visit me, and I looked at her iPad, and I saw the notifications, every single notification filling up the entire iPad screen was horrible, violent news about Toronto.
yeah,
And I'm like, and then I just kind of thought, So, mom, are you clicking on this stuff?" And she said, "Of course I'm clicking on it. It's happening. People are getting hurt in the streets of Toronto." And I said, If every time you click and share, you are telling your iPad, give me more of this.
yeah,
You are participating in reducing your options. So, and of course, yeah, it's going to completely change your worldview. I It's so subtle. Humans, we think in timescales of days and weeks. These are things that affect us over the timescales of months and years and decades. And I just want everyone to be aware of what's happening. I compare it to like being in a bar and we're all screaming at each other, and we don't realize that somebody's been turning up the background music for the
yeah,
past 20 years. So if we don't step back and go, oh, wait a minute, we're so focused on the individual arguments or the news of the day, or the political positions or perspectives of the day, that we're not looking at this meta crisis, which I think needs some attention.
yeah. I agree. I'm 100% behind you. I think the more I listen to when you presented at Lavacon and I watched the session, the more I started thinking like what my kids are going to be like, how they're growing up, and their obsession with their cell phones and scrolling Instagram or scrolling YouTube, and what they're learning from the AI more than from me or my husband, right? So
Oh, that's actually a question. Where's this going to go? What is the generative AI difference going to be?
yeah,
I'm a little. I don't know how much time we have left, but the I don't even know how to talk about this. So I follow a lot of AI stuff, and so I get these notifications about like the latest generative AI examples. And
yeah,
so I something that started coming out was AI trailers. So people will take artificial intelligence and they will generate like a new movie trailer or like a TV trailer for a TV show they like, or a movie they like, or a book, etc. So they'll make a new Star Wars trailer, and then make a new Buffy the Vampire Slayer trailer. And of course, they're being made by teenagers in their basements, and so the women are basically like Barbie if you could bring her to life. It's there's the way that they're portraying uh, women in these videos like is terrifying. And I read the comments, and it's all other, I hope to God, adolescent boys, and not adult men, um, who are just totally there for it.
yeah,
Like they're like, this is great. And so what switches from when an AI is curating your choices for you to a generative AI is when the switch gets flipped for you being able to create your own truth. you know Hyper addictive, hyper engaging content. And so as much as all of this has been happening, we're starting to deal with the decisions that we made 10, 15 years ago or 20 years ago. With generative AI, the ability to just say, I am totally just down for consuming this thing, because it will literally be perfectly adapted and personalized to me. I think that's something that we have to prepare our kids for stuff that hasn't happened yet. With
Right.
the And so that it comes back down to, you have to know when to pump the brakes on your own pleasure. You need to know when to say, I've had enough cake, and I need to go. And the same thing with relationships. You have to make real connections with people. You need to go talk with your friends. You might love talking to them while you play PlayStation over a headset. You need to you need to get out of the house now. You need to go see them. And I think parents talking to parents, and as I said, parents talking to themselves, is going to be a fundamental, because we're already so addicted to what we have. When they turn the dial up, when they double and 100 times that, with this content, making it so perfect for our instincts, then I think we're gonna have to get ready well in advance before that hits us.
I, you're just saying that makes me think of my son and just makes me so concerned all over the place.
Okay. But there is a way you can. I don't want to be like a total downer, and I don't want to. I do want to scare people. I do, because it's scary. I want to
Yes,
be. People should be afraid, more afraid than they are. But through these techniques of human connections, conversations, humility, and understanding ourselves, and that's why I'm trying to give these easy metaphors, like cake,
yep,
pornography, like anything else that's hyper stimulating. We learned how to deal with those. We will learn how to deal with this, but we have to have the conversation about it.
definitely. I agree. Definitely. Well, thank you, Nas. This has been really, really interesting. And I think I said it before when I was telling you when I was watching your session. You just every time you talk, it makes me think of other things that I want to do. Like I want to go into the school systems here in Nova Scotia and say we need to have some kind of an AI class for
Great.
these kids so that they understand stuff better. Like I think that is the way that we need to start thinking for sure.
That's my main goal, is to inspire people that they can take action in their own lives.
Yeah. It's great.
Thank you so
So
much.
thank you. And thank you to the sponsor of the Content Matters podcast. That's Discover CX by Ingenix. Discover CX, which I like to shorten to DCX, is a suite of cloud based solutions for documentation teams and CX professionals. Um, Everything from component content management to headless content delivery to customer portals. They kind of have all the solutions that you need. And I would like to invite you to visit discovercx.com to learn more about them and their solutions, and to visit us on LinkedIn, Discover CX on LinkedIn. Subscribe to our newsletter so that you learn more about the podcast and what's coming up. And I will have the show notes for Naz's session there with all the links to the Truth Collapse website and anything else that you might be interested in learning more about, because I think this is definitely a topic that we should all be talking about all the time. So thank you, Naz, and thank you everyone for listening.